I'm afraid we seem to have lost that feed there with Jens Stoltenberg. We will come back to it as we can. But for now, let's return to Moscow and to the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova.
Thank you very much. And moving on, do we have Sky News with us?
Yes, you do. Thank you very much for taking my question. Russia's defense secretary has said that Vladimir Putin has gone full tonto, that is English slang for completely mad. Certainly that's the view of many people looking at this. He's launched an unprovoked attack on his southern neighbour that is killing a lot of Ukrainian cousins of Russia and Russian soldiers. What's your reaction to that description of his action?
Well, you know, it's surprising that such evaluations are given by Defense Minister of the UK regarding authorities of a different state. I think he could have thought up of similar adjectives thinking of British Prime Minister, if we talk about personal judgment, and if we talk about the operation and that there are people dying, then yes, unfortunately, this is a huge tragedy that there is a need to resort to such methods. And this is exactly what was talked about during 8 years of our policy, of our efforts, our work, 24/7. That's what it took to demonstrate that the peaceful resolution of this high-tension conflict, which in 2015 was already a bloodbath, a priority problem, that any other scenario other than dialogue is tragic in its nature and should be avoided. And could you please say how many years must it have taken, must have this bloodshed gone on in eastern Ukraine? 5, 10 years? Why did you start counting victims only today, or say yesterday? Who gave you the right to ignore victims, especially we were talking about thousands of them over all these years? Isn't your conscience tormenting you when you Western journalists speculating on Minsk agreements and Russia never mentioned that in the eastern Ukraine, in Donetsk and Luhansk Republic, there are peaceful citizens losing lives every day. You never counted them, just like President Zelensky never considered them people. Who gave you the right to speak of the victims starting only today? If that's the way you create your reports, if that's your approach to it, you are not journalists and you're not people. 13,000 people, and I am not dividing them, although in all honesty I would very much like to, and maybe should have, in those who shot first, in those who were members of Ukrainian military men or their regular army and nationalist battalions, which then became part of the armed forces. I do not divide them from civilians and from the people which you call militias, separatists, and which we say are self-defending. All in all, according to OSCE, 13,000 people died, and OSCE had no opportunity to account for every victim. It's only their primary analysis. Where were you? Why didn't you ask these questions in Kiev? Why didn't you broadcast people in Donbass? Why did you give them no opportunity to attend international organizations meetings or join in online. You have no conscience at all. Maybe you should first calculate the number of the people which died at the hands of the British authorities in Iraq. How many people died there on the orders of Downing Street? How many civilians died? And how many British military men died? Would you like to talk about Afghanistan? Because it's well time for that. So before you judge others, start with yourself. And if you talk about the situation in Ukraine and the actions of Russia in protecting peaceful citizens of Donbass, you shouldn't start counting with February 2022. This history is many years old. At least you should start with 2013. And the last thing I would like to say, you'd like to count the citizens which died. Did you count the people that died on Maidan in 2013, 2014? How many people died? How many people were killed by snipers? How many armed law enforcement people died? How many people were killed with stones? Have you ever reported on that? At least once during those years. So it's not for you to say that there is an operation conducted. It's not a beginning of a war. It's an operation to end a war which has been going on for many years. And ignoring it and not recognizing it is just as criminal as servicing informationally Kievan regime. And I am sorry for my emotion, but this has been overdue, and we do not want to listen to and trust your mass media. We will respond to your questions, but such starting points and such approaches are unacceptable, because what you do is propaganda, and it was fine with propaganda in other spheres, but when you tie it to promotion of war, which for 2 months you have been escalating, this is just inadmissible, and then you twist it all and blame the victims. I am sorry.
If I could answer any of that, please, Ms. Zakharova.
No. No, I do not want to.
Reported on. Can I ask you, talk about Minsk? You're saying that you were prepared to go and talk with the Ukrainian regime in Minsk, but the terms of those talks seem to be the total surrender of Ukraine. You're saying it needs to be following demilitarization. How can that be acceptable to President Zelensky if you're asking him to surrender before he even begins negotiating with you?
Wait, you said that, you heard me, Russia was ready to send an interagency delegation to negotiations in Minsk. We have declared that. We just mentioned it. We are ready for it, and it was said by the press secretary of our president, and from MFA I can also say that it is true, such work can start any time. The only question is that whether the other side, under the influence of the West, will start trying to whistle out or lie, or you yourselves, the representatives of the Kievan regime, would start contradicting and debunking each other. I just mentioned the declaration by Kuleba. This is not something I made up. This was reported by various news agencies. They have to determine their position. Are we talking about negotiations, or are we pressing some accusations against our country?
As I understand it, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, has said that these talks can go ahead once Ukraine has demilitarized. Surely that's just demanding their complete surrender before talks have even begun. No,
we have mentioned that we are all